Zardoz, otherwise known as the movie where Sean Connery looks like this. Released in 1974, this strange and surreal and even avant-garde science fiction movie/experiment focuses on a post-apocalyptic dystopian world of the future, where a floating stone head hovers around a wasteland and spits out a heap of guns. And wow, we're only just getting started into the insanity here. We follow Zed, played by Sean Connery, who goes on a journey to discover the truth about the weird and warped society that he lives in, where what follows is one weird and bizarre psychedelic fever dream. Although at the time of its release, Zardoz was shrugged off as being a terrible movie and downright nonsensical, in later years it would gain a cult status. So what is it about this movie? Why is it so weird, and yet so many people, myself included, just can't seem to get enough of it? Well, today we are going to find out by exploring 10 things that you didn't know about Zardoz. So, prepare your red futuristic diaper, pull up your thigh-high boots, and get ready to ask, damn, what's in this stuff? As things are about to get weird. Number 10, Zardoz started off as an entirely different project. Zardoz was written, produced and directed by British filmmaker John Borman, whom had previously directed the haunting and disturbing masterpiece Deliverance. The Zardoz project started off with Borman making a movie adaptation of Lord of the Rings for United Artists. However, the increasing budget costs for making the movie were starting to concern United Artists, so they pulled the plug on the production of Lord of the Rings, and now the movie was no more. Well, for the time being anyway. However, Borman still wanted to focus on a story of a fantastical world, one that's not too unfamiliar to our own world, which would in turn lead to the creation of Zardoz. Number 9, original premise. So Borman got to work on his own Strange World movie, one that was original and not based on pre-existing material like Lord of the Rings. However, the project that would eventually become Zardoz started off as something completely different. Now, if Wikipedia is anything to go by, it was set in the not-too-distant future. Well, 5 years into the future to be precise, which would have set the movie in the late 70s. And it was about a university lecturer who goes looking for answers when one of his female students goes missing, with him becoming obsessed with finding her. Yeah, this totally wasn't Zardoz at the start. But Borman would make drastic changes. Instead, he set the story in the distant future, in a post-apocalyptic setting. He also wanted the story to be a metaphysical exploration, which is more about inner space than outer space. He also took inspiration from the writings of Wizard of Oz creator Frank Baum and T.S. Eliot, to which finally he created Zardoz. Borman would further explain his decision by adding, quote, "Most of the science fiction that gives the genre the bad name is adventure stories in space clothes. Dude, have you even seen what you had Sean Connery wearing in your movie?" That's like saying, all these space outfits, they are ridiculous, and gave sci-fi a bad name. But Sean Connery wearing a red nutslinger and thigh-high gumboots, now that's where it's at. That's the kind of science fiction we should be watching. Now, to be fair though, the late 60s and 70s was kind of the time of sexy science fiction spacesuits. But I just think, don't pick on the weird sci-fi space costume formula when you yourself have a weird sci-fi space costume. Number 8. No one wanted to make Zardoz. By Borman's own admittance, no studio wanted to back up Zardoz. I know, right? Big shock. Considering Borman had just previously made Deliverance for Warner Brothers and that it was a big hit, he thought that it would be a sure thing that Warner Brothers would back the movie, but they didn't want a bar of it. Thankfully, Borman's agent was there to help out, as he had information that the head of 20th Century Fox actually really wanted to work with Borman. So the agent rung up this 20th Century Fox head and basically said, "Hey, yeah, we have this movie called Zardoz. Do you want to make it? Oh, and you've only got 2 hours to decide." Naturally, this executive came down to London to meet Borman and his enthusiastic agent. And so they went to lunch, and this head of 20th Century Fox was given a script, and he was very confused by what he was reading. But Borman's agent was so persuasive, he somehow managed to get this guy to back up the movie. As Borman put it, he never gave the poor guy a chance. Also, by Borman's own words, during this meeting, the 20th Century Fox executive was so confused and nervous over this baffling script, his hands were literally shaking. Oh wow, I can't say that I blame him, but seriously, that agent must have been really persuasive. Number 7, the original main lead. So when it comes to the movie's main character Zed, who we follow on this strange and surreal adventure, the actor originally cast in the part was Burt Reynolds. After all, he had previously worked with Borman on Deliverance, but Reynolds suddenly became ill, and so he had to drop out of the production.
Yeah, I wonder, did he become ill, or did he become ill?
Sean Connery was then brought in as his replacement. Connery took on the role because he was desperately trying to get out of his James Bond image. He had starred in Diamonds Are Forever a few years earlier, which was to be his last Bond movie. But after that, the offers just weren't really coming in anymore. So he had to reinvent himself and to get out of his Bond image. Well, he definitely did that in Zardoz, that's for sure. Connery took on the role for just a mere $200,000, which was incredibly low for Connery at that time, especially when compared to the as mentioned Diamonds Are Forever, where he was paid $1.25 million. Hey, I guess sometimes a job's a job. Number 6, filming location. Zardoz was filmed entirely in Ireland, namely Bray, County Wicklow, which is south of Dublin. A lot of the extras seen roaming around the scenery in Zardoz were locals to the area, as well as travellers. Filming in Ireland, however, could have also ended the movie's production, as a heap of rifles were needed for the film, but the Irish government put a ban on importing rifles due to issues with the IRA, but thankfully they were evidently able to get rifles. Borman's wife designed all the futuristic costumes, and it's said that none other than Stanley Kubrick himself acted as a technical advisor in an uncredited capacity, which isn't such a strange concept, as he would also go on to do that for the Bond film The Spy Who Loved Me a few years later. And all up, filming would take about 5 months. Number 5. The final shot was a nightmare to film. So the movie ends in a way that the rest of the movie is trying to be, insightful and philosophical, where we see Zed and Consuela start to age via scene transitions, till they are mere basic skeletons. In other words, it looks like me trying to find something good to watch on Netflix. Although this effect may look aged nowadays, this was actually a pretty intricate effect for its time, and took a long time to film, due to the makeup constantly being added to Connery and actress Charlotte Rampling. However, what made filming this scene extra tiresome is that it had to be filmed an infuriating 3 times. With the first take, the footage was damaged, and the second take, the negatives were exposed, which once again ruined the footage. But I guess 3rd time's a charm in the bizarre world of Zardoz, as finally the effect was achieved and the footage wasn't destroyed.
And without a doubt, finally having the effect done and in the can was a relief to everyone.
Number 4. The music of Zardoz. The score of Zardoz was put together by British musician David Munro, and just as with the rest of the movie, it's strange, surreal, and truly out of this world. Seriously, some parts of the score really make me feel like I'm tripping major balls. At the time of creating the music for Zardoz, Munro wasn't really a movie composer, but he was the director of the early musical Consort. In order to create the music, director Borman encouraged Munro to use medieval instruments. He also used some classical music, including Beethoven's 7th. But back in those pre-Star Wars days of science fiction in the 70s, lots of movies in the genre would use classical music, which, unless I'm mistaken, was a popular trend started by 2001: A Space Odyssey and A Clockwork Orange. Number 3. A time of free love and peace, man. The era in which Zardoz was made in was definitely a time of experimentation, exploration, and sexual revolution, as well as expanding the mind with substances. In fact, according to IMDb, Borman himself was under the influence of substances while writing the movie and during its production. So much so, not even he knows what some parts of Zardoz even mean, suggesting that he was so out of it, even he can't decipher his own movie. Oh wow, nothing says rock and roll more than a director who's so out of it, he doesn't even know what the heck he's making. Then we get the make love, not war aspect of Zardoz, and the time that it was made in. It seems that some people were quite randy while making this movie. There's something of a popular legend that in Sean Connery's contract for Zardoz, it stipulates that his love scenes had to go on longer than the usual on-screen duration for love scenes. Okay. But this didn't bother his co-star Charlotte Rampling. Quite the opposite, in fact. Apparently, she was actually really looking forward to filming her intimate scenes with Connery, and was disappointed that they were shot and over and done with very quickly. Once again, going back to IMDb, and remember, this is IMDb, a site where literally anyone can write anything, so take it with a grain of salt. There was so much substances and free love going on in Zardoz's production and the community where the movie was being filmed. A mobile medical clinic was temporarily brought into the community, and there was a population spike at that time of 15%.
So it sounds like everyone was having a great time and was running around doing the spicy tango. But once again, this is IMDb, so who knows?
Number 2. The intro was added at the last minute. So once filming was complete, with everything all wrapped up, the studio then panicked that audiences may not be able to make sense of the movie, on the account of it being so weird. The studio felt that some exposition was needed in order to help get the viewers up to speed, which is why the movie starts with the floating head of Arthur Frayne, aka Zardoz, filling in the cracks for us the viewers. Apparently John Borman really didn't want to film this scene, but he was kind of made to. I wonder if that's why a ridiculous looking moustache was literally drawn onto the character. Almost like Borman was trolling the higher ups, and was just trying to make the scene look even more ridiculous. But then again, I guess we would have to ask, would he sabotage his own movie? Well, at this stage, honestly, who knows? Number 1. Zardoz was infamously unsuccessful. If this is intellectual thinking, then Donald Duck deserves the Nobel Prize. This was the scathing review by Ian Christie of the Daily Express. And oh boy, was the release of Zardoz a messy one. This was a slaughter. Needless to say, the science fiction revival days of Star Wars were still far, far away. Zardoz was released in February 1974 and made a painful $1.8 million on a $1.57 million budget. Now, if you can believe it, Zardoz didn't completely get obliterated by critics. After all, Roger Ebert, Variety, Time Magazine, and the Los Angeles Times observed Zardoz in a more positive light, with Ebert adding that it feels like a futuristic world created by stoned set decorators, which apparently was a positive to him. It was the public in general who really didn't like the movie, and if anything, just couldn't figure out what the movie was, or trying to be for that matter. It was seen as being a little too quirky and off the scales weird, like as if stepping into a weird trip that doesn't really make much sense. Word of mouth has been put down to movie theatres showing Zardoz to pretty much empty screenings, and that annoyed audience members who did watch the movie would leave the theatre and tell those who are waiting to go and see Zardoz to not bother going to see it, you're wasting your time. You know, save your money, buy some flares instead, or a hat. Now, it has been suggested that Zardoz does explore interesting themes, and that it is an intellectual movie full of complex storytelling, but at the time, its message just flew over people's heads. But I don't know. That kind of sounds like blaming the audience for not being smart enough to fully appreciate Zardoz. Sometimes a bad movie simply is just a bad movie. But that doesn't mean there isn't anything to love here. Zardoz has received a cult following, and it does have an adoring fanbase. And I've got to be honest, I actually really do like this movie. It's so batshit insane, it's kind of like you have to see it to believe it. So I guess you can say that I like it the same way that I like The Room. It just truly is a bizarre sight to behold. I think this one review on the website, Musings of a Middle-Aged Geek, summed it up the best, where it said, quote, Zardoz is the time machine on acid by way of Monty Python. Perfect. I could not have said it better myself. So just because Zardoz may not be a good movie, that doesn't mean that it can't be enjoyable. It's like a strange and bizarre experiment, possibly fueled by substances and 1970s isms. So I say definitely check it out. There literally is no other movie like Zardoz.
I think that Zardoz is a movie that most film enthusiasts know about, for if anything, just how weird it is. So I do think it's one of those movies you have to see to believe. Anyway, I'm Minty. And that's all I've got. That's all I've got for this one, sorry. See ya!